Welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea, and this is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. That very world of Nintendo is still in a bit of a holding pattern that seems like it will have very few breaks until the Switch 2 Direct in April. So I decided this main segment will involve looking at all of the launch lineups in Nintendo history and slotting them into tiers. We'll also talk about the greatest Nintendo launch games of all time and cover a little bit of light news. Joining me for that is the man behind Electric Playground. It is the legend himself, 30 plus years in the game, Victor Lucas. How are you doing, Victor?
I'm doing great, man. It's very weird to hear the legend word bandied around out there, but thank you very much. That's very kind. And I haven't seen you in 2025. We talked about getting together a little bit before, but our schedules just couldn't line up. It's good to see you, my friend. And thank you for being a part of our Rocket and Ray Gun Awards this year. You were great.
Yeah, of course. I believe you asked me to keep it under a minute, right? And I am very bad at keeping under a time limit. So it took me a few takes, but I did get there, and I did talk about my favorite games of 2024 for your award show. I hope it went well.
It turned out great, man. Like hearing from the community is so special. And, when we had the TV shows, I had a big team that would work with me and we would get through all of the games in a year, just like you when you were working at Game Informer. And so it was always a really special thing to get everybody together and talk about this stuff. But of course, modern media, the way it is, it's been a fun kind of pivot to include people that watch our content, watch EP, and have watched for a long time, a lot of them, and to see those faces, and then also some people from the media space and from the game development space. I love it. I would like to do more, but it always becomes a time constraint. That's why I say try to help me out here and just keep it to about a minute, because these shows would go on forever if we could get everybody in. Maybe one day.
Oh no, I totally get that. When I started this show, I said, all right, the sweet spot for this show is between 45 minutes and an hour 15. That was like my desired length. Fast forward to 2024, my longest or my most watched show was when there was like a recap of like one of the Nintendo Directs that happened. And I think we went for 3.5 hours, which is the longest
my goodness.
I've ever podcast. So don't worry, we are not going that long today. But it was just like, man, I definitely lost that 45 minute to an hour 15 thread somewhere along the way here.
That just says to me you like to talk about games, man.
Oh yeah.
That's it. You're my kind of people.
I've been doing it for more than a decade and a half, which, compare that to yours. You've been talking about games in front of a camera for 3 decades. That is wild.
It is wild. Absolutely. I came up with this tagline for our EPN, the Electric Playground Network, of Play Forever in 2014. So, a little more than a decade ago. And I just thought it fit because we'd already been going for a long time at that point. But that really is my motto at this point. I intend to play forever, and it fits. And it's really, when I sign off from some of the shows and stuff that I do, I say play forever, and I get that in a lot of the chats and stuff. People say it back to me, and it's really heartwarming. It's really freaking cool. I don't know if I've had play. I think probably I went to a few cons last year, and I got a few play forevers face to face, which is pretty rad. But this is an incredible privilege to be able to talk about video games, and it's so gratifying, and I would do it anyway. And to be able to communicate it, with the support of people and often with people like yourself and for people, that are looking for a little bit of guidance or my point of view. I feel so grateful that that's the existence I have, and it's surreal to be doing this decades later. But I also feel like I found the path. This was what I was supposed to do.
I actually recommended Electric Playground to a friend just the other day. We were talking and he was like, oh, I've been like really in like this nostalgia like where I've just been going and like watching old footage from like the 90s and the early 2000s and like interviews and like footage from E3 and everything. I'm like, well, do I have a channel for you? Because my friend Victor over here has been doing this for 3 decades. And not only is he doing like new content where he's like reviewing new games, like you just published your Avowed review on your channel.
Yep.
But there's also like, footage of you interviewing Hideo Kojima in your YouTube channel recently from like Metal Gear Solid 2. And
Yes.
it's like, man, like this is like a deep well of just exciting, nostalgic, historical footage at this point. Like, I mean, there's not
Yes.
many options or opportunities to see this type of footage preserved as well as it has been.
Well, and this is through the partnerships that we have with the University of Toronto, Mississauga. They're up converting our full archive. We donated the archive to the school as an educational license so they can share it with their students. They have game study students there. And so they're digging into the archive, not only the episodes, but a lot of the raw footage and stuff that we have as well. And as part of our partnership, they are digitizing everything for their school, but also they give it back to me so that we can share it with everybody on our YouTube channel. And I got to tell you, I hope you do this too with your work. I hope there is some way for you to re-examine your work and to dig into it. But there is something so invigorating about seeing younger you with all of that hope and all that optimism and that goodwill going out and trying to manifest a thing, and to feel that decades later that there was some achievements there, some success with that. And also it's really been inspiring for me to have new conversations with people, some catch-up conversations with people that were on the show before. So I've done some podcasts, some Where Are They Now type podcasts, and I love that. But also lots of other interesting conversations about the state of games media and the state of our conversations with uh, the audience and also with the developers, because somehow that has been completely broken. It
Mm-hmm.
is we're in a very I think a terrible kind of situation right now where it's so clenched and everybody's so nervous about saying the wrong thing, and a studio lives or dies now on the success of one game, and everybody, you can just feel it, everybody is just ready to pounce and ready to be angry and ready to capitalize and monetize on that anger, or they're terrified, and developers are scared to say anything. And I had this unbelievable access and privilege that we just crafted with everybody, and PR was always, I think, a little bit hesitant, a little bit nervous, because we would get a little bit crazy sometimes. But I think what people understood about Electric Playground and me specifically, like, everybody loved games, but the show really came out of my heart. Like, it was like, oh my God, I love this stuff. I want to know why we care about this stuff. I want to know who makes this stuff. And I want to have that conversation in a way that's going to be palatable to a lot of people. And it took a long time before we kind of found the groove, and we did make it palatable for a lot of people. And I see, there's lots of excellent work out there. I don't mean to throw anybody under the bus, but there is just a lot of it's rampant negativity, and there's a lot of I don't know. It's like shock radio in a way,
Yeah.
or fanzines. Like, we went back in time to the fanzines where everybody was just railing about stuff, and it comes from passion, which we can't deny. Um, but I don't know. I miss that just honest one-to-one kind of conversation with these game creators. And now, if people watch Classic EP, or EP Classic as we call it, that's what they can get every week. And thankfully, yeah, I found an amazing partner with P&P Games, who's a retailer in Winnipeg here in Canada, and they sell classic stuff, retro stuff. I wanted to find a partner that it was a great fit, and they've just been amazing allies. I couldn't have found a better partner for this endeavor, for this exercise of getting all of this classic stuff out there.
That's awesome.
And yeah, it's been really rad, man. It is weird though to live in two timelines like that at the same time, right? Like, because
Yeah.
every weekend I'm young me, and then I'm back to, like, I'm not crotchety or cranky old me, but I'm older me for sure. And I'm playing games again. And God, man, when you're at this, and you've been at this a long enough time too, you start to review the same game again, but it's the remastered game
Yep.
or the re-release game. Oh my God. I think there's been games now that I've done 3 times, where it's been like boo boo, and it's surreal. But then, I was actually quite fond of what Sony just did with their State of Play. I think they had a lot of
Hmm.
great reveals in that, a lot of new things I hadn't heard of.
And that's a perfect segue, Victor, because we're going to cover the news here, and it has been an incredibly slow news week in the world of Nintendo. So I'd say it's only fitting that the vast majority of the news that we're going to be talking about today came via that PlayStation State of Play live stream.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not going to be talking about the PlayStation exclusives or anything, but there were several games that were covered that are coming to a Nintendo console. At least we know are coming to a Nintendo
I
console. I'm sure
think
there are other
all
things.
of them will, man. I mean, I think that's the era now, right? Like
Yeah.
exclusives are a dirty word now.
I mean, unless you're Nintendo, in which case, like,
Unless you're Nintendo, yeah.
you're never going to see Mario on an Xbox, I don't think. I mean, there was a
Nope.
question there when people were like posing, like, "Oh, the Wii U's failing miserably. Maybe they should put their games on Xbox." It's like looking back now, it's like, wow, what were they thinking?
Yeah, that's
But
crazy.
so first up, one of the first announcements back at the Game Awards in December was an acclaimed studio's retro reimagining of the classic Ninja Gaiden games with Ninja Gaiden Ragebound. And I was like, all right, awesome. I love the Blasphemous games. I'm very excited for Ninja Gaiden Ragebound. And a series that is very much adjacent to Ninja Gaiden back in the day, anyway, back when it was a 2D game, was Shinobi.
Yeah.
And one of the first games shown at this most recent state of play, wouldn't you know it, is an acclaimed studio's retro reimagining of the classic Shinobi games. The game is called Shinobi Art of Vengeance.
And
And
this is Lizard Cube, who
yes,
brought out
Lizard Cube.
Streets of Rage 4, and they
Mhm.
crushed it with Streets of Rage 4. Absolutely adore that game. Honestly, Shinobi was the most exciting thing for the whole PlayStation reveal for me. It was the first thing or the second thing.
Yeah.
It was very early in the show, and I know it's a 2D game, and I'm also nervous because people didn't show up for Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, which is crazy to me. That was beautiful, one of the best of 2024. But I know that this probably didn't have the budget of Prince of Persia. You know, it didn't have the
Yeah.
pressures of Prince of Persia. And that team knows what they're doing with 2D, and Sega's got a lot of smart moving going on right now. They got a lot of smart decisions. They're looking at their classic archive finally,
I
and
love
they're
it.
finding ways to get us these new games or new games based on these characters and these properties. Hell yes, that set a really great tone for the whole showcase. I thought that was a great way to start the state of play. And that's coming to the Switch too, and
Yeah.
probably Switch One.
I
Why
think they've
why
announced
would you
it's coming
not
to
put it on?
Switch One.
It is? Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, so it has a combo-based combat system, amulets that you can equip to enhance your abilities. You can use tools. I'm assuming it's just like cool, like ninja tools, like grappling hooks. I mean, I don't think they've announced any of the tools, but like all kinds of different like gadgets and tools to overcome obstacles. It also, in the press release, says there are more than a dozen stages full of platforming puzzles across several different biomes.
Nice.
So yeah, it is coming to Switch and every other major platform on August 29th. So
Amazing.
very excited for that. As a longtime fan of those 2D ninja games, whether it be Shinobi or Ninja Gaiden back in like the NES Genesis days,
Hell yeah.
this has me very excited.
Well, and what's great about those games is that they're as incredible to play in 2025. And
Mhm.
Lizard Cube, who understood that about Streets of Rage, totally gets it for this game. Perfect idea, perfect developer. Man, I love 2D games, man. If they are done very well, like they just resonate and they just matter and they're so freaking fun to get lost in.
Yeah, I've been playing. I finally put a bow on my playthrough of Metaphor Refantasio,
Okay,
and
good.
absolutely loved it. The ending I am not a fan
I,
of. Not
I'm
the
not
ending of the
there.
story, but the ending of like the game itself, like the final
Okay.
stretch. I
Yeah.
think that game could have used an editor at the end of that game, and also
Yeah.
a little bit of tuning in the final boss because, good lord. Um, but
That's most games, man. That's most
uh,
games now, Brian. Like I think about this all the time. Like there are games that I know you and I could point to that were over too quickly and we lament them. We miss
mhm.
them. We want to go back into them. And I want more games to deliver that feeling, not this feeling of like overstaying your welcome. Like there's some kind of value quota that the developers have to meet based on a spreadsheet. No, get us to miss the game and think about it and want to go back.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
all kind of goes back to me. I remember like the moment that I realized that there, and I think a lot of people realized that there was this shift in the thinking, like the mainstream thinking of gamers of like we don't need a game to be like 500 hours. Like
No.
remember when I think it was Dying Light 2 put out a
Mhm.
graphic that was like, it'll take you 760 hours to do everything in this game. And everybody's like, then I guess I'm not playing this game because that sucks. Just
Yeah.
like, wait, they're probably like, wait,
Yep.
what? Like, I thought you guys wanted bang for your buck.
Yeah. I mean, Red Dead Redemption 2 was definitely that for me. Like, I love that game, but it just took me so goddamn long to finish it. It was just so bloody long, and I was like, "Oh my
Hmm.
god, no!" Uh, and by the end, it's like you start to question why you're still playing. You know, like
Oh, yeah.
yeah, this has trapped me. And I also kind of felt that for Tears of the Kingdom, which was spectacular, but it was too much. I just felt like, okay, let's go. You know, let's finish this thing. I did not feel that for Breath. You know, Breath. I didn't want to leave. I purposefully held off on the final boss fight because I wanted to linger and stay with this space. You know, and I think of the first Red Dead all the time because that was a game where I finished and I was morose. I was like riding my horse around, going, I don't want to leave, man. I love this place. I love these people.
That's how I felt about Ghost of Tsushima because I was just
Yeah,
like, man,
totally.
this game is just I was just absorbed by that game. But
That
all
was
that to say, with the
absolutely.
metaphor thing, I am so looking forward to after playing this game that I very much loved. Like it was my number 4 game last year, and that definitely holds true, even with my qualms about the ending and
Y
the last stretch of gameplay. I
yeah,
am very much looking forward to playing something a little bit breezier now, like
yeah.
a 2D Metroidvania, or like I was even toying with going back to play Mario 64 or something like that, where it's just like kind of
Yep,
like comfort food, quick into the action, no like need to sit through like super long cutscenes or long
yep,
dialogue options that you need to play through. It's just like, nope, I am jumping around, and the most Mario is going to say is, "Here we go."
yeah. I love that. Yeah, Mario Wonder is excellent for that, by the
Oh,
way.
for sure.
What a delightful game that is. But I definitely default to, the Insomniac Spider-Man games when I
Hmm.
need to just palate quench, and they just released it for, PC, Spider-Man 2, so I've been playing that on the, Asus ROG Ally X, and it's been working pretty well, which is cool. But the Arkham games are kind of like that as well for me, and the Uncharted games are like that for me as well, where you can sort of jump into a chapter and do some missions and just have some fun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's there's definitely a list of games that I've considered like replaying, but I was like, yeah, after playing this like this long RPG, I think I ended with like 105 hours in it.
yeah.
I was like, yeah, I'm ready for like maybe like a 10-hour experience.
And I said this in the Avowed review that I just put up. It's like we have had just this cascade of great role playing games. You know,
Hmm.
Diablo 4 and Baldur's Gate 3 and Final Fantasy 16, and then all throughout last year. Uh, we just have had a lot of really, really big games like Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth and I love Mario and Luigi Brothership. I love that game. You know, I feel like it didn't get the respect it deserved. It was just so delightful. Paper Mario was insane. Just this huge grouping of excellent role playing games, and then Avowed is just I just found it okay. You know, I just found it kind of sort of at kind of mid,
Yeah,
which is
that's
too bad.
unfortunate. Did you like
Yeah,
Outer Worlds?
I did. And, I think with Outer Worlds, because of its outer space stuff, there wasn't a lot of, flying around. Like, obviously, Starfield kind of took the crown a little bit there. But Outer Worlds was kind of unique that way. Certainly, it was similar to a Fallout type of vibe, but not everything was broken. There was still a sense that the world was still thriving, some of these worlds. And
Mm,
it was also manageable, it was contained. And I liked that about it. It wasn't super, super crazy. And Avowed is kind of that way as well. It just doesn't. In this, it doesn't really elevate the art form. It doesn't really sort of do stuff that us. Like I kept thinking about Dragon Age: The Veilguard, which I think has been completely overlooked. And it's unfortunate because BioWare's in this precarious situation now as a
yeah.
studio because it didn't do well. And Dragon Age: The Veilguard ended up being one of the games that I played the most in 2024. It was really freaking fun. The ending's amazing in that game. I don't know if you've got to the end of that one.
No, I only put about 10 hours into it.
And I know it's hand holdy and it's a little slow and it's not as maybe mature in some of its writing as the launch Dragon Age games, but God, it's fun. It's just really fun on the sticks, and I liked the relationships I was building with everybody, and they all come into play as sort of. Uh, Charge into this massive ending for the game, and I really really like that game. And I kept thinking about that because you do a lot of the same types of things
Mm,
in Avowed, and I just had way more fun playing Dragon Age.
man,
But
well,
it's
that's too
hard to
bad.
play all of these games, right? They're all
Yeah.
so big. It's hard for
Especially
one
last year.
human being. Yeah,
Last year was
especially in
just
this
so
last
many
year.
RPGs.
Yeah.
I mean, I love the Like a Dragon series, and
Yeah.
Infinite Wealth I was having a blast with, but it was
Yeah.
just like I had to move on to something else, and I had to like play something else, and it was like, okay, well suddenly Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is out, and that's going to
Yeah.
be like
Same.
70 hours.
Yep, same. And I had to bail on Infinite Wealth, and so now Like a Pirate's out already or soon, and I don't even know if I'm gonna even play that. Like I'll try, but I've got two other huge RPGs
Yeah.
on the PS5 ready to go. I didn't even get to Kingdom Come Deliverance 2.
Yeah.
Like
Oh my
there's
god.
there's too many of these massive games happening
That's
all at the same time.
100% true. But that's another perfect segue because if you want a Like a Dragon experience that is a little bit shorter, Dave the Diver is getting new crossover
That's
DLC.
great. Yes, that's great.
So it already crossed over with Dredge, but rather than going indie with its next crossover, it is going so far in the opposite direction, full AAA. But
Yeah,
it's Ichiban's Holiday. So if you are a fan of Yakuza, Like a Dragon, or Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, it is the main character from that game or those games, and it looks like it's adding like a beat 'em up gameplay, but that might
which
just
is
be something that's for
great,
the
man.
trailer. I don't know. Like
It's
they
so
didn't really.
great. That speaks to Sega's brilliance here too, right? Like they have really shrewd people handling the deal making, and
Mm,
there's like this new sort of appreciation for what makes this company so special, and they're working their butts off to find ways to reach players and to get people to re-experience a lot of the joy that made them. And I think that's wonderful. Plus all of the Atlas output has just been ridiculous, like just one excellent product after another.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to see what his title is here because there's one person that I think has done a fantastic job over at Sega.
Mm,
So Ivo Gershkovich. I don't know if you've
mm.
interacted with him at all. He
No.
came in, I think, around 2016 as kind of like the head of the Sonic the Hedgehog brand. And
Okay.
I was his first interview, and basically he spelled out like all these ways that he was going to revamp the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise and,
Right.
put
And
all these
that's been
like
on fire too.
right? Yeah, so like he did a
Amazing. Yes.
fantastic job with the Sonic franchise. He
Yes.
laid out all this stuff to me back in 2016 about how he's going to like work with the team to install these different like marks of quality that are required and like, largely that has been the case. Looking at different
Cool.
partnerships, looking at all these different ways to make the Sonic franchise so good, bring it back to kind of like the level of quality it was in its glory days. And those partnerships I'm sure were including like the deal with Paramount to create these movies and all these other
Yeah.
various incredible partnerships that have blown up for the Sonic
Yeah, the
franchise.
movies are excellent. Yeah, there is this sort of cultural awareness at the company. Not this kind of like um puff in your chest kind of thing that I think younger Sega might have had,
Yeah,
because they were still defining themselves. But now it is decades. And, what we're definitely aware of is this retro scene is massive out there. I mean, look at how many emulation channels there are on YouTube and Twitch. And people are rediscovering Genesis games, specifically Genesis, I think. A little bit of Saturn and Dreamcast a little bit, but Genesis was so freaking special. And that's when Sega really kind of climbed to the top of the mountain. And then they were defining that. But now with all of these years of hits and some lessons, some non-hits that were lessons, they can really sort of claim that. And I don't know about you, but when I saw the Sega logo and all those screens of all those incredible games, which are like core memories for me
yeah,
before Sonic the Hedgehog
Sonic 3.
movie.
Yeah,
Well, the first one they did it. I was emotional instantly. Like there was something in me. It was like, oh my god, like because I don't know about what it's like for you, but for me, being a champion around video games has always been like my thing. Even back in high school, and people would turn to me for their gaming ideas and suggestions, and they come and play games at my house and stuff. And so it's always felt very personal to me. And when I
Yeah.
see it reflected in the wider world and people having emotion around it, that's why E3 and Comic-Con and all these things have always been so wonderful. And clearly working on the show and meeting developers too. But when I saw it in a big screen like that before this huge blockbuster movie that I love, like Sonic 1 is still one of my favorite video game movies. I freaking love that movie. But yeah, I got emotional, and I feel like, yeah, Sega is really getting to a point of I don't know, like they can do no wrong right now. And if they said, "Look, we're making a new machine," I think we'd lose it, And I think, okay, let's go, let's get back into it. Like I think we would be ready for that. It would be crazy.
I would be excited. I don't know if it would be a smart business move, though. I will
I
say
know, right?
that. But the reason I brought Evo up is because I believe it was last year he was actually moved off of Sonic and is now just the head of brands at all of
Mm.
Sega. So I wonder if this kind of like more involvement in these various crossovers and everything has to do with his influence on what he did for the Sonic brand and now bringing that Sega wide.
Something's got to be up there. I know they have a new president, James Milkey, who's a friend. He's an old EGM guy and works with Limited Run now, I think, and does a lot. He does a little bit of everything. Awesome dude. I don't know if you've ever met him before.
No, I haven't.
He was known as the Milkman during the EGM days, but he did an interview and profile, and he's friends with the president of Sega, and they were talking about it. And he's a younger guy, this guy, but I think he's been with Sega for a long time. And I don't have his name on the tip of my tongue, but clearly they're doing some great things. And it's surprising to me that the most, like, I loved Frontiers. I don't know if you enjoyed Sonic Frontiers. I love that game, and I didn't think I would. I got completely obsessed with it, and I loved Generations, the most recent release. I thought that was terrific
Sonic
as
Shadow
well.
Generations. Yeah,
Yeah,
fantastic.
God, it was so much fun. And it's surprising that the 2D one, the Superstars game, was the least impressive of the run in the last little while, But that Sonic racing game from the PlayStation State of Play, that actually looks really fun. Was
Yeah.
Sonic Racing Overworlds?
CrossWorlds.
CrossWorlds. It looks so fun.
So yeah, we'll talk about that in just one second. The Ichiban Vacation or Ichiban Holiday. What is it called? It is Ichiban's Holiday. It is coming to Dave the Diver in April, and Ichiban is on vacation. Brought his bartender for some reason, and they end up helping Dave bring the restaurant to the next level. So yeah, very much looking forward to that. I played a lot of Dave the Diver, but it was not. I never got to the end of it, so maybe this will be enough motivation for me to go back because I loved what I played of it. I think I put 8 or 9 hours into it and had a great time.
I played a ton too, and I'm in the same boat. I didn't get a chance to finish it, but I love it.
Yeah, so now let's get over to the game that you referenced, which is a game that was revealed at the Game Awards, but we finally learned more about Sonic Racing CrossWorlds. And so this trailer was weird to me because like it showed all this stuff happening, like very cool things, but it only showed Sonic characters. And I that made me think like, okay, well, I previously speculated that it would be another like cross franchise racer where it's like, okay, Sonic and also like this character from Monkey Ball and this character from this game franchise and all this stuff. They only showed Sonic characters. So I was like, okay, well, maybe not. And then I guess the press release said that it's going to include characters from other franchises in the Sega universe as well. So it's like, that's weird. They wouldn't show at least one of them in the trailer.
They'll probably have their own sort of direct, I think, just around that.
Yeah.
The thing that I was talking about while we were, because I live streamed it with the EP audience there, and the thing that hit me right away is that this is a tough year to launch a kart game.
Oh yeah. Well, here's the thing that I will say about this. They tried Team Sonic Racing a few years ago. Very solid kart racing game, but it was trying too hard to compete against Mario Kart. And
Mm,
that is a losing gambit, no matter who you
yeah,
are. I don't care if you're PlayStation, if you're Activision, if you're Xbox, if you're Sega, you're not going to take down Mario Kart. Like I had Kevin Bayless on the show, and just right before the holidays, and we were talking about like his time at Rare, and from his earliest times playing games and then joining Rare and then creating Diddy and Donkey Kong and then his love of Diddy Kong racing. And he even
yeah,
said, like, yeah, if you're going to create a kart racing game for a Nintendo console and you're not called Mario Kart, good luck, is basically what
yeah,
he said, even though like Diddy Kong Racing is beloved to this day.
yeah, yeah,
But I will say that, this game style works really well for Sega when they get weird. Like
yeah,
Sega and All Stars Racing Transformed, one of the best kart racing games of all time, and still
absolutely.
has a great audience to it. And like whenever Sega has tried to do that straight up kart racer, like with Team Sonic Racing, it always falls so short of Mario Kart by such
Yeah,
a
no,
considerable margin that it just kind of gets swept under the rug. But when they experiment a little bit, like with what they're doing with this, the differentiation often makes it so it sets apart, and people are like, okay, well, I can play Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and this game. So
yeah,
like,
totally.
this almost feels like Sega and All-Stars Racing Transformed meets Diddy Kong Racing meets maybe a little bit of Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, because you're going between like these various worlds like at a moment's notice.
The portals, yeah, yeah. I hope it's like transformed. I almost feel like they should have just made a sequel to that because it is so beloved, and I think it's got this kind of cult following. It's an excellent game to pick up on Steam, by the way. It runs incredibly
Oh,
well
really?
on a good PC or even on the Steam Deck or on the Ally X. It's like a 60 frames per second experience, which you don't get on the other consoles. Even I know it's backwards compatible, I think, on Xbox.
Hmm.
But it is a wonderful game to this day in 2025. And it's been surprising to me that the teams haven't gone back to that. And it feels like this is the closest kind of connection to it because we saw the off road racing and we saw some of the hover racing. There was like a snowboard kind of vibe to it as well. But yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. Like if they don't open this up to lots of other guest stars, like that's just shooting themselves in the foot. I think any kart racing game from now on
Yeah.
has to include character customization. You need to be able to build your own stuff and express yourself in the game, but you have to open it up to a lot of other characters. Otherwise, you're dumb. You know, like even if Diddy Kong Racing came back, it would have to. I don't know, open it up to other rare characters, which would be so cool. They have the Jet Force Gemini cast or something like that
Yeah,
pop
Banjo
in, or the dude from
Kazooie,
Blast
and
Corps and
I mean
Banjo Kazooie.
Banjo was in Diddy Kong Racing.
Yeah, yes.
Conker was in Diddy Kong Racing. So yeah, there
What?
were other.
Why do you think Nintendo hasn't put Diddy Kong Racing on the N64
Oh
channel on
man.
Nintendo Switch Online? Like, are they worried that people are going to see that it's way better than Mario Kart 64? Like, do they not want people to love that game?
I mean, I wonder if it's something to do with like the Rare thing, but at the same time, they put all the or Donkey Kong Country games on
Yes.
the N64 or SNES catalog. They
Yep.
have struck that deal with Xbox to put GoldenEye on
Yep.
on the N64 catalog. Perfect Dark is in the N64 Mature app. It's such a weird thing. Like there's a few like very obvious exclusions in the catalog. I mean, don't even get me started on the lack of Pokemon games in
Yeah.
the Game Boy catalogs, because
This is a
geez.
show for you right here, isn't it? What's missing on the Nintendo Switch Online
Yes, it
channels? Yeah.
is. I mean,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
a
There's so
lot of
many.
stuff missing. Yeah.
Well, I have the perfect one too, which yeah, I think it would just eat people's time because it's so freaking good, and I don't know if enough people recognize it. It's the Donkey Kong 94 for the original Game
Oh
Boy.
yeah.
That's like
So
a
good.
perfect game. That's a 10 out of 10 game, no matter how you come at it, you know. And in 2025 or whatever, like when they release it, people are gonna go like, "Holy, why did I never play this game before?" It's incredible.
Yeah. That is
Yeah,
one of the greatest Game Boy games of all time. One of the
that's
greatest.
my favorite. Yeah, I mean, Tetris and those two are up there, but Donkey Kong '94, wow, what a game!
Yeah.
You almost can't believe it runs on a Game Boy. It's that good.
It's incredible. So Sonic Racing CrossWorlds, I think that they ditched the Sonic and All Star Racing just because it feels like it was too clunky. I think that when
Sure,
they
yeah,
did Team Sonic Racing, they saw that like, oh, that's punchy. That immediately gets across what this is.
good
Sonic
point.
is obviously the headliner here. So if they just say Sonic Racing colon whatever the name of the game is, people will probably understand. Like they're not like saying like, Nintendo's not out here being like Mario meets Zelda Racing Deluxe, whatever. It's like, no, okay, it's a Mario Kart game. We understand what that is, but also Link is in it, and also the Inklings from Splatoon are in it. It's like, okay, we understand there are probably guest characters. So I think that it's probably a smart idea to like make a successor to All Stars Racing Transform, but then just like make the name not like take 5 seconds to say.
Right on. Yeah,
So
you got
that's
a
my theory
marketer
on
in you, my friend.
So with this game, basically you're racing, travel rings pop up, transport you to new worlds in the middle of a race. You can play the game solo or as a team online or offline. And then the press release also mentions building your ultimate machine and unlocking gadgets. So it does make it seem like they're following your mandate that games in 2025 will need to have some sort of customization elements.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I don't think we have a date yet. I think it just says coming soon,
Yeah.
but it has said it will be coming to Switch
You
and
know what would be
every other major
smart is
platform.
if uh, this would be really smart if Nintendo and Sega did some kind of crossover with the Switch 2 version of the game, like some kind of kart that you can create in
Oh, that would be
CrossWorlds. You
cool.
can also race in Mario Kart. I mean, God, I like we would eat that up,
Oh,
and that would
absolutely.
instantly make that the game to buy. That version of the game to buy, right?
There are so many collaborations I would love to see Nintendo do. I put this out on Blue Sky where I was like, man, imagine if like there was like a Nintendo specific expansion to Power Wash Simulator
Right.
where you're just power washing like an R wing or like Princess Peach's castle, or
I mean, that's a no-brainer. Do that.
it
Yeah, that's
really
very
is.
good. Yeah, great idea.
That would be such a cool thing. I'm not even the biggest Power Wash Simulator. I have friends who are huge Power Wash Simulator fans. I've
Yeah.
enjoyed what I played, but it's not like I'm gonna pour 25 hours into it or whatever. But like
That's therapy for some people.
yes.
We got kingdoms to rescue, you and I. Other people have terrible jobs. They want to come home and they want to just clean stuff in their
Just want
game.
to power
That's
wash.
why The Sims could never do it for me, man. It's like, I'm too busy ignoring the housework I have to do because I'm lost in 100-hour games. I don't want to do housework in my video game. No, thank you.
So the final piece of news that we will cover from the state of play is Warriors Abyss. So it is
Oh, yes.
from the Dynasty Warriors franchise. It's a little bit of a
Yeah.
spin-off. And
Yeah.
it's that franchise is always about a small number of characters taking down thousands of enemies. So it makes
Yeah.
sense that this game would kind of take that concept and borrow a few elements from something that seems like Vampire Survivor vibes to me.
Yeah. That's
I
a
don't
good
know
analogy.
exactly how it plays. I've not gotten my hands on this, but you fight through thousands of enemies as a singular hero, but you can also recruit the souls of past heroes for a total of up to 6 teammates that you can recruit. It has a roguelike format and rewards you for choosing the more difficult paths through the game.
Hmm.
And it is actually out on Switch and every other major platform right now. They threw
Oh,
it
it's
out.
out.
Yeah, it was a surprise launch. Well, I mean,
Oh my
if
God.
if
Okay.
people on the Patreon are listening to this the day before this episode comes out, it actually comes out on Switch on the 14th, but it was on Xbox and PlayStation as soon as that state of play was over.
Wild. I'll have to check this out. It's not. I had my fill on the Warriors franchise.
Yeah.
My co-hosts and I would joke about like, there's a new one out this week. Like it was. They just made so many of them,
They
and I
did.
just felt like, wow, okay, we have an incremental new addition every single time. But I know there's huge fan base. What's the genre of the Warriors? There's
Muso?
Muso. Yeah, right. Or Musu. Yeah.
I never know how to pronounce that properly.
Me neither. I know that there's a fever for it, and I know that people love roguelikes, so it's smart. It's all smart. I also think that if you just jump into the arcade and just sort of embrace the arcadey quality, because some of the Warriors experiences had a lot of kludged in role playing, and you'd be chatting and talking, and it was all about trying to have some historical connection to stuff. But you ended up fighting thousands of people, and characters are flying and disappearing as you're bashing your 20-foot, you know,
Long
what,
sword or
not a
whatever.
sword or yeah, whatever it is. You're just killing all kinds of different characters that way. Got a little crazy. But I think if you just embrace the arcade thing, like almost make it feel like you're popping a quarter and you're lasting for as long as you can, that could be a good direction for this game.
Yeah, I've always kind of it's been hard for me to find the real depth in the games.
Yes.
Just because maybe I'm just seeing it at a surface level. It just feels like kind of like mindless slashing and running to the next
Hmm.
destination. And the biggest level of experience that I have with the franchise is Hyrule Warriors.
Right.
Just because I enjoyed. I played through that first game. I didn't end up playing all the way through Age of Calamity, the follow up there.
Yeah. Which
But
I think
yeah,
was in reference to the game's frame rate, I think.
yeah, there's a few games like that on the Switch. I will say that. But yeah, so if you're interested in Warriors Abyss, I did see Digital Trends Giovanni Colantonio, sorry, Gio. He posted that he played a few hours last night, and it seemed like maybe this was designed as a free-to-play game at one point, and then like they pivoted
Oh,
midway through development
ouch.
to make it a $25 game or whatever it is,
Oh.
because there's some like semi gotcha style design elements. So
Well,
just
at least they did that pivot. I think we're going to see a lot of that over the next
yeah.
few years. We're going to see a lot of games that started out as free to play and are now not free to play.
But yeah, I have not gotten my hands on that. But that's all the news from the PlayStation State of Play. We do have like I guess two other Nintendo adjacent stories that were not from the State of Play. We can do these really quickly here.
Hmm.
Nintendo added precisely one new game to its Nintendo Switch Online Game Boy Advance library. It originally arrived in 2001. It is Wario Land 4. And
Yes.
extremely respectable 88 on Metacritic.
Oh,
And
it's a great game.
in case you're wondering, Game Informer gave it an 8.5 out of 10 back when that game first came out.
That's
I
awesome.
have not played this game because I was not really like super invested in my Game Boy Advance, but you seem like you're a fan.
I am a fan. I love these WarioWare games. I have the Analog Pocket, and I didn't like it that much when I first got it because of how expensive it was. But now I've grown to love it, and I love being able to grab a cartridge off my shelf. And one of the first ones that I did was I don't think it was 4, it was Wario Land 3,
Okay.
which I think is Game Boy Color. And God, I was just blown away. I was just so charmed by it. And I think there's been two recent games. There's been Pizza Tower and Anton Blast,
Oh,
who
yeah.
both harken back to the Wario where or Wario Land experiences. The way that the levels are kind of broken up. It's all so strange. It's all so weird and hapdash. Like Wario's just busting through walls and obstructions, and you don't know if he's going to ram into something, if it's going to affect everything. And
Yeah.
there's a clumsiness to it that I adore, and that's definitely been sort of picked up on in both Pizza Tower and Anton Blast. And so it's been fun to kind of re-explore and re-examine that. So I'm looking forward to loading this up on my Switch. I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I've never checked out Wario Land 4, so I will have to experience this for the first time. But that is out on the Switch Online Plus expansion pack subscriber or subscription this week, February
On the
14th,
14th.
just in
Yeah,
time for
Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day. Yeah, Wario, the
Yes.
most romantic of all the Mario characters.
Have a rotten day.
I'm sure he
I love
smells
him.
just wonderful. Uh, and the last news story we're going to cover here, Rocksteady Games put out one of the biggest busts of 2024 in Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. But I would say that that was an anomaly in their gamography because most
Yep.
people know them for their work on the Arkham games. And according to a report by Bloomberg's Jason Schreier, Warner Brothers is going through it. First of all, they reportedly decided to cancel a whole bunch of games this past week and apparently have rebooted their development on the Wonder Woman game that was announced several years ago. I believe that's Monolith that is doing that, the development
Right.
team behind Shadow of Mordor. And Rocksteady is reportedly going back to its roots and developing a new Batman game.
Mm.
And according to that report, the game is still years away. Victor, I know you are a big fan of the Arkham games. You know,
Enormous fan.
there are a few publishers I'm legitimately worried about right now. Ubisoft
Mm,
is up there, but I would say Warner Brothers might be at the very top of that list. They had best-selling games. I think the best-selling game overall a few years ago with Hogwarts Legacy. But
yeah,
man, I was looking at their games that they've published recently. Talk about a bad run here outside of Hogwarts Legacy, which was definitely the anomaly for them. We already talked about Suicide Squad. Multiversus was killed, brought back, and then killed again. Mortal
yeah,
Kombat 1 fell short of expectations. Mortal Kombat Onslaught, which was like the hero collector mobile game, barely lasted a year before it was shut down. Harry
right.
Potter Quidditch Champion seems to have underperformed. It's not looking great for Warner Brothers right now. Not to mention Warner Brothers in general seems to be having a rough stretch here.
I mean, that's the core of it, right? It is a and you don't know how much of that is very very wealthy people playing around with shareholder value and stock price, and whether there's acquisitions in the air. You just don't know, because if you look at Warner Brothers as a an archive entity or as an IP entity, I mean, they're second only really to Disney at this point, like
Yeah,
the amount of stuff that they have in their stable is unbelievable. I saw our friend Greg Miller was putting a video out there expressly to James Gunn, beseeching him to have a powwow and a
yeah.
meeting about the superhero lineup that they have. And I'm right on there with Greg, who is saying that there should be smaller games based on these characters and these properties, and they shouldn't take years and years and years and be all chips on the table, risk it all kind of investments. They should be um, tapping into our love for these characters. A lot of 2D stuff would be incredible with them. And I
Oh yeah.
totally agree with that. I think it'd be amazing to play an awesome 2D Batman game made by, maybe Sabotage or something like that, or Tribute or
That would be
something,
great.
or Yacht Club. And
Imagine like
I
a
just,
a Shredder's Revenge, but
yes,
for like the Avengers. I know we're talking DC primarily here, but like the
yeah,
Justice League, a Shredder's Revenge of the
yes.
Justice League would be amazing.
It would be amazing. Better than that, though, I think would be Batman for the NES, but it's a
Oh yeah,
sequel, Batman 2. And it's
that
the
would be
purple
awesome.
Batman. Like, honestly, like how we would freak out for that.
Get
And the
Michael
market
Keaton to
would
voice.
absolutely, yeah, and it's scratchy and it sounds shitty, and there's weird sort of warbled cut sequences and stuff. We would eat that up, and DC's sitting there, and they could, and Warner Brothers is sitting there, but they could do that for lots and lots of their movie titles. I had this idea years ago because I think Warner Brothers was involved with a lot of the martial arts action movies that were coming over, working with Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee and stuff. It's like you're sitting there on this archive of,
Uh,
I believe, but it's like make a real Enter the Dragon, like get us into these kinds of, make a Bruce Lee versus Jackie Chan and throw in Jet Li and some of the other cool,
have
you
NetherRealm.
know,
You just have them make a amazing like
yeah,
martial artists fighting game.
but from the films, and they're
Yeah,
ripping and tearing from one scene from one movie into another movie,
that'd
maybe
be
ripping.
incredible.
That'd be so much fun, right?
That's the real
There's so
multiverses that I want.
Right. Multiverses seem so half-assed, so undercooked right from the beginning, so clearly chasing something,
Yeah,
as opposed to it being a revolutionary thing with these unbelievable characters. Even Ready Player One is indicative of the lack of understanding of what they have. Ready Player One as a property is incredible, and I keep thinking about that as a great series. But it shouldn't be a Warner Brothers showcase series. The Warner Brothers stuff just felt like it was so projected as we're the studio, so here's all of our IP. And it feels like Warner Brothers keeps doing that again and again, rather than doing what Sega's doing and going back to thinking about how they authentically ingrain these longstanding traditional characters, these characters that are so embedded in pop culture, but in a way that really works in the video game space. Hogwarts Legacy really did. It was
yeah.
an exquisite game, and it subverted all of the negativity around J.K. Rowling. It still was an incredible game. You could not refute it. You could hate JK and her beliefs and all of that stuff, but you play that game, it's like, wow, what a like. And my kid is a huge Harry Potter fan, so she just was completely transfixed. And I was so appreciative of that, that there was
Yeah.
so much craft in building that. And you can't spend that every time, but you can certainly, like bring the team and all the leaders from that team and go to another studio and have them talk to that other studio about finding the path in and how do you make it feel like that. And if the budget's smaller, you can still find your way to incredible games and movies and TV shows. But I feel like was Zaslav and the other sort of
Yeah.
senior management at Warner Brothers. They're playing this weird chess of
Cutting content and like
yeah, well,
the
they're trying to
Roadrunner movie and the
yeah
Batgirl movie. It's just like, oh, these
yeah
movies are basically finished, and we're just gonna axe them because of tax cuts or tax benefits.
right. And so I feel
Ugh.
like they're trying to grow the value and their personal wealth. And they're thinking of their parachutes. They're thinking of their exit strategies. They're not thinking of legacy. They're not thinking of like the culture. They're not thinking of what kind of beautiful work they're going to be attached to and remembered for. They're not thinking about that. They're thinking about truckloads of cash.
Yeah.
Like how do we get generational wealth for everybody that I know and care about, but at the expense of all of this beloved kind of opportunity that exists out there. I think that they should do something like what Disney has been doing, quite frankly, although it hasn't worked every time for them. But Disney has been partnering with studios and letting them kind of run with it. Like, look at Indiana Jones, what an
Oh yeah.
exceptional job Bethesda and Machine Games did there. And honestly, I would argue Star Wars Outlaws is a wonderful Star Wars game as well. But maybe, but not as good as even EA's Jedi games. Those two
Hmm.
have been incredible,
I mean, look at
But
Spider-Man. The Spider-Man games, they're fantastic.
right, and the Spider-Man games, and hopefully the Blade game turns out great, and the Captain America Black Panther game that Amy
Oh
Hennig
yeah.
is working on. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a smarter play for Warner Brothers, but that means that they need to have some really knowledgeable and passionate management structure at WB Games that can work with these studios to make sure that everything is aligned, and that's not easy to do. That is
Mhm.
very hard to do. A lot of stakeholders. It really is like a sign of the people at the top at Warner Brothers. You don't get a sense that they care about Warner Brothers. They
Mm-mm.
care about huge fat stacks of cash, and that's what's emanating off of this. Which sucks.
Unfortunately, all too common, especially in the gaming space. But I would just say the tech space in general is
Yeah,
it's just running rampant right now, which is why we're seeing so many pain points across the entire tech industry, not just gaming, but like everywhere.
yeah.
And it's really
Yeah, and
frustrating.
it's frustrating, and it's like we are really entering this weird kind of phase right now where, like, what is IP and what's
God.
copywritten, and who owns what,
I was a
like
philosophy minor, and this is starting to like harken back to some of those classes that I took.
it's
What is
crazy, right?
IP?
Yeah, like what is it? Like OpenAI is just actively going out there and just scraping anything that they want to and returning, and then they get their data stolen by a Chinese company, DeepSeek,
Yeah, and they get
and they're
upset.
yeah, and it's like, who owns anything anymore? Like what's happening here? It's crazy. I mean, God, it's indicative even in the video game industry. Like all of these emulator devices that keep popping up there, like every week there's like a new thing, and they're all loaded with games. You don't even have to download anything. You just buy it on Amazon. It comes with thousands of games. It's like, does anybody care about any? Like, what is happening?
It is a very weird space that we exist in.
Yeah,
I'm happy that it seems like Rocksteady might be going back to their roots with a Batman game, if
I
not an
hope
Arkham
so.
game.
Yeah,
Still don't know if that's enough to save Warner Brothers, but it's definitely a step in the right direction after the obvious misstep that was Suicide Squad.
they should not just make it all big gambles, though. We should
Correct.
not just be waiting on a 5-year development cycle on a new Arkham game. And in fact, I think the more counter programming, the more kind of short AAA and AA experiences that we get out there, especially in this subscription model that we're definitely moving towards
Being conditioned to
faster if you're
accept.
on Xbox and like you want people to jump into these game worlds and experience these things and then talk about them. If you're a subscriber, if you're like a subscription service, you want people to play through it and then tell people to play it and jump in. That's how all of these streaming shows are all about. And if you notice, all of these streamers, they're not making 26 episode seasons of
Mm-mm.
shows. They're making 6 to 10 episodes of things, and they want that expensive, beautifully crafted. Like, I don't know if you saw American Primeval from Peter Berg.
Mm-mm.
It's intense, and it's so cinematic. The guy is really impressive, like the way that he puts his projects together. Uh, but it's 6 to 10 hours. I think it might only be 6 hours, and it's harrowing. And it's like, oh my God, it's not a feel good thing. But that's kind of indicative of the risk taking that's happening with the other streaming services. And I think games need to kind of get on board with that, because just what we've been talking about with these 100-hour experiences. And if you're doing IP based stuff as well, like, it just is a much better uh, sort of vertical integration to kind of get you to think about, you finish a game and you want to watch the movie, or you finish a game and you want to read a comic book, or you want to play another game based on another character. But if we wait 5 to 10 years for these games, and they're, $500 million to finish, or whatever, 3 to 500 million, or 2 billion in the case of Grand Theft Auto, that's just that's just too massive a gamble, too long of a wait. And you're also, then when you finish your thing, you're expecting people to live in that experience, and there's so much competition out there,
Yeah.
and the market isn't growing fast enough. You're not engaging enough people. So
No.
yeah, I think if you're Warner Brothers or Disney, you got to be looking at shorter, fulfilling, impactful experiences. And that first hour, especially, and I don't want this to be the only way that games get made, don't get me wrong, but especially in this streaming thing where you're subscribing to stuff and people are just sampling. Like, a lot of people are probably going to jump into Avowed because it's on Game Pass. And if they don't like that first couple hours, they're not going to play any more of it.
Yeah.
And so what's the point of all that effort if people aren't going to be there? And I feel like, we could get some killer 6 to 10 hour, 15-hour, 20-hour games, just killer AAA games that people will play all the way through. And I'd like to see that happen. And I'd like to see people finish these things and then also say, oh my God, that was amazing, I want to play something else. And hopefully, all of these subscription services, not just Game Pass, but PlayStation and Nintendo, however they're going to evolve theirs, are planning for that, and they're going to deliver on that, and that
Mm.
will lead to more people playing games, and it will lead to more experimentation.
Yeah, I definitely think there is a shift on the horizon for the industry, with kind of that dynamic in mind. But Victor, we are going to take our only break of this episode, and when we return, we will be looking back at all the launch lineups in Nintendo history. We will be right back. We are back, and since we're in this weird limbo period with the Switch 2, where we know what it looks like, and we know there's a Mario Kart game, but we don't know much else, we have been speculating a whole lot about what that launch lineup might look like. And that's why, for today's episode, I want to look back at the launch lineups of the first games that came to Nintendo consoles and handhelds to this point. So,
Mm.
Victor, do you make a habit of buying new gaming systems right when they launch, or do you usually wait a second? Like, do you go to midnight launches and brave the crowds, or what's your strategy here?
I absolutely do. It hasn't always been the case. I think since PlayStation, Nintendo 64, and Saturn, those were all launched.
Hmm.
So, when those came out, and ever since day one, I've had all the new machines. And that includes the mid-gen refreshes,
Oh,
like
wow.
the PS5 Pro and the PS4 Pro, Xbox One S, I think was one of them. Yeah, I've been pretty consistent and pretty, often I've been working with game companies all the way along, and I've got friendships and relationships with game hardware manufacturers. And so often they have sent us review devices and
Hmm.
devices to be able to play all of the software on. But I also buy them when they don't,
Yeah.
when they have a smaller inventory or a smaller seating or whatever, then I'll go out and get them. But way back in the day, I didn't worry so much about that. I worried more about the sort of collection of games that came with each of the hardware pieces out there.
Well,
But now, yes, I'm very on it, and I love it. And the new obsession is getting these bloody handheld PCs, which are getting better
oh
and
yeah.
better. Like the Steam Deck was amazing, and the Ally X is great, but they make too many of them, and so now it's like, wait a second, this is nuts. They're like cell phones at this point. Every
Yeah.
6 months, there's a new one.
So that's perfect that you were always more fixated on the games that came alongside these consoles and handhelds,
Yes,
because that's what we're talking about in this segment.
right,
And so I'm going to run down all of the launch lineups. And for clarity, we're going to go by the US launches during this segment,
perfect.
which I would imagine are pretty close to the Canadian launch lineups as well.
Yep, yep.
So let's get started here with the one that started it all, the NES. It launched in 1985 in New York and then came out to the rest of the country in early 86. 17 games. So 10-yard fight, baseball, Clue Clue Land, Duck Hunt, Excite Bike, Golf, Gyromite, Hogan's Alley, Ice Climber, Kung Fu, Pinball, Soccer, Stack Up, Super Mario Brothers, Tennis, Wild Gunman, and Wrecking Crew. What a
Pretty solid. It's pretty solid.
salvo, though, to have 17 games.
It's pretty, and the diverse as well, like lots
Yeah.
of different tastes there. That's pretty solid.
So,
And this was right on the heels of the gaming crash of the 80s. So this was
yeah.
Nintendo kind of saying, no, there's going to be a lot of appetite for these, disparate experiences.
This is
Good on
not
them.
just a fad the way a lot of people thought. Like, I think a lot of people in the
Yeah,
early 80s were like, oh, yeah, video games. That was a cool, like, toy fad, and now it's gone
exactly.
forever.
Right.
So we are going to be putting all of these launch lineups into tiers. There's an S
Okay.
tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, and D tier. Where does that
Okay.
lineup land for you?
As a total launch lineup with 1980s technology, I think that's a pretty damn good one. I mean, especially with Mario Brothers. I would say I'd say that's a B, at least a B.
Yeah, I was in between B and A.
Yeah.
I mean, you have no fewer than three iconic games in
Excite
there.
Bike and Tennis, amazing. Ice
Super
Climber,
Mario
amazing.
Brothers, Duck
Yeah.
Hunt,
Duck
Wrecking
Hunt,
Crew
amazing.
is a well liked game. I mean, not
You're
on the
right.
level of those other ones, but
No, you're right, because like they're so seminal, we still reference them, we still play as them, we still buy amiibo based on these characters and these ideas. They're in Smash, Yeah, I think it's an A, man. I
all
think
right,
you're right.
let's slot that into the A tier. So we have our first ranking. The NES launch lineup goes in the A tier.
And hold on, we
Yes,
have to stop and thank Nintendo for this whole hobby, because it
yes,
was dead, right? And it was this bloody machine that said, no, it's not. It's not over. It was this system right here that convinced the entire world's population, hey, we should get a Nintendo.
yeah.
We should play video games again. It was this, and it was this cool launch lineup.
And I think that it was kind of lost on us at first, where we were just like, oh yeah, the NES launch lineup. Like, yeah, those games haven't really aged particularly well, but in the context of when they came out, I think that
Yeah.
that was an A tier for sure.
Yes. I was more impressed when they did the minis of the Super Nintendo and the NES Mini. I was more
Mhm.
impressed with the NES Mini because, and I told you this in private combos, I wasn't really consuming every game when the NES was out. I was acting at that point,
Yeah.
and to see these games, and now most of them are on NSO as well. A lot of the great ones are on NSO. To see them in context and to see the imagination and the creativity when they had so little horsepower, basically it was like a slightly more powerful Atari 2600. I feel like they got to make these games on, but they're so freaking cool. There's so much beauty in the design. I even had my daughter look at Final Fantasy 2, I think, on the NES Mini, and she identified the the White Witch, and she said, "I want the girl one," and it's just a bunch of blocks, and, and she was like 3 or 4 or something like that, and it's like, "I want to play as the girl one," and it's like, wow, man, you can still see the artistry when they had so little technology to make that art. The
It's
NES is very
amazing.
special.
It's amazing,
Yeah,
especially the gaps that your imagination will fill in, especially as a child.
right.
So yeah.
Yeah, that was
So
profound.
NES lands in the A tier. That brings us to a pretty noticeably smaller launch lineup, but still has a
Right.
couple of iconic games in there. The Game Boy in 1989, the US launch lineup was 5 games: Alleyway, Baseball, Super
Yeah.
Mario Land, Tennis, and of course Tetris.
Now, I think I did buy this on launch day.
Wow.
Do you know what the launch day is for the Game Boy?
I don't.
Do
Let
you
me.
have that? Because what I remember of buying the Game Boy, maybe it wasn't, but it was the same day that Stevie Ray Vaughan passed away, and that's super tragic. But I was playing the Game Boy that I had just bought, and I remember Stevie Ray Vaughan's plane crash happened on that day, and it was on the radio as I was playing the game. So they're indelibly kind of linked to
So
me.
there's about a year gap between when the Game Boy came to the US and Stevie Ray Vaughan passing away.
Okay, all right.
So,
So I knew it was early on, but I was certainly like obsessed with that game or with that machine and playing Tetris. Tetris is one of the strongest releases, period,
oh yeah.
ever. And what a what an amazing launch game, man! That's so crazy.
I mean, I'm leaning kind of towards a B tier with this one.
Yeah,
And the reason is it's very small, but
yeah,
with the context of history and having a handheld device that can play a full on Mario game
yeah.
is kind of mind blowing. And then also, obviously, Tetris being what Tetris is. I
So
think I'm
so
going to,
what was it? It was Alleyway, Mario Land,
yes, baseball
Tetris, and baseball.
and
Baseball's not that great,
tennis.
and tennis is okay.
I'm going to say,
Uh,
I'm going to
B,
throw out B tier.
yeah.
All right. So,
Still, an A in terms of progressing the industry forward
yeah,
and sort of showcasing what is achievable and what's possible, but not the strongest launch lineup.
sure.
But what an impressive piece of kit that was, though, too, man. The Game Boy was still is. It's still so freaking cool. Lasts forever on 2 AA batteries. I love it.
Yeah, the Game Boy was a truly fantastic device. I'm glad they iterated out on the hardware over the course of like the next decade, basically. But
Yeah.
yeah, Game Boy's launch lineup lands in the B tier. This next one is very near and dear to my heart: the Super NES,
Yep.
1991. We got once again 5 games: F Zero, Gradius 3, Pilot Wings, Sim City, and Super Mario World.
Awesome.
This is another tough one, but
I
uh,
legendary games,
yeah,
F-Zero and Pilot Wings and Super Mario World. I mean, this is an A. It's
yeah.
tiny, but it's an A. These are legend, and even SimCity on SNES was really rad.
Yeah, I mean, I was even like thinking maybe this is the first S tier, but I think it's too small for that.
Yeah,
But the concentration of greatness is maybe
because
unmatched.
Gradius is excellent too. Yeah, they're all great games.
Oh man,
Absolutely.
I'm tempted, but I think we're gonna keep it in A.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. I mean, Super Mario World, obviously one of the greatest games to ever be created. F Zero, we're still playing as Captain Falcon in Super Smash Brothers. Not much
Yeah,
else, but I guess F
yeah,
Zero 99.
which was awesome.
Yeah,
That
but
was a nice out of nowhere gift surprise from Nintendo. But yeah, we want a real one.
yeah, exactly.
We want something brand new. Absolutely.
And speaking of something brand new, the next one,
Mm.
1995, you know it, you love it. It's the Virtual Boy.
Oh yeah.
And 4 games on this one. And maybe
I
not the
have
level of
2 of those.
recognition.
I don't know, and I think this was the first machine that Nintendo sent to Electric Playground,
Oh, wow.
and I don't know if because we were working with them, we launched our website in 1995, and we were reviewing stuff, and I don't know if I bought one and they sent one, or if they sent 2 because they weren't selling, which is possible. So I have a small library of the games for it. What were the games though? What were the
So,
launch ones?
Galactic Pinball,
Yeah,
Mario's Tennis, Red
yeah.
Alarm, and Tolero Boxer.
Yeah. I mean,
Is this a D tier?
yeah, this
I
is.
think it has to
I
be,
mean,
right?
it's more to do with the hardware. I think the games were kind of neat, and the idea was kind of cool, but it was just way too soon, and too primitive.
Yeah, and it
So yeah,
it also, like, none of these games had any historical impact whatsoever.
no.
Which,
Although I have to say, I'm a sucker for video game pinball games. Like I'm
mhm.
currently playing on my analog pocket Mario Pinball Land from the GBA, and it's really fun. Like I don't know, I love that idea.
I do too.
So
I liked Pokemon Pinball a lot back in the day, back on
yeah,
Game Boy Color, um, Sonic
I love playing.
Spinball.
Exactly, but I also love playing pinball levels in 2D Sonic games. I always
Yes.
love that. That's super fun.
That was always a
Yeah.
fun one. Uh, the smallest launch lineup is next, 1996, the Nintendo 64.
Yep.
Only 2 games. We had
S-
Pilot Wings 64 and Super Mario 64.
Crazy.
That is
So
so
I
long.
bought the Japanese version of the N64,
Oh,
and I bought it in LA. I'm based in Vancouver in Canada, but I bought it in LA, and we were on a sort of a marketing trip. This was 95, 96, I guess. I think it came out in 96, but earlier in the year in Japan. I'm not sure. Uh, but I played Super Mario 64 in Japanese, and I played it on the what I couldn't wait. This was the first import console I'd ever bought and the first import game, and I couldn't wait to play it. And so we were road tripping. We were driving back from LA, and we were staying in hotels. And the hotels back then didn't have the right connectors. You couldn't
yeah.
just take your N64 and plug it into the TV. And so I was like, ugh. And what I ended up doing was playing it we had a video camera that had a little black and white screen that you could put the input into, the video input. So I was playing it on my bloody camcorder like this. And it was so dumb, but I couldn't wait to play the game. I was so excited to play Super Mario 64. And for the longest time, that was my very favorite game of all time. Now it's Breath of the Wild.
Same.
A-
I mean,
And yeah, and it's perfection, and it's forever perfection, and it was so profound, like every other 3D action adventure game had to live up to that, and if it didn't, in terms of the way Mario controlled and everything, then it wasn't as good.
yeah.
Like everything, Crash Bandicoot, Tomb Raider, everything else that we were talking about, especially for me, less so for Tommy, my old co-host.
I always
um,
say that back in that era, every single 3D platformer was chasing Mario 64, and
yeah,
every single just 3D action game in general was chasing Ocarina of Time.
right,
That's just how big
absolutely.
of a trailblazer Nintendo was, not only in the 2D space, but also the 3D space. And I always point out that things that were established in Ocarina of Time are still used in, like, the best 3D games today. Like Elden Ring allows you to lock onto an enemy while you're fighting them. That was something that was pioneered with Ocarina of Time with the Z targeting.
They figure out the language. And what's amazing about Nintendo is that they start from play first. They start from before they put any story or art or whatever. They just in their R&D, this, they just work it out so that it just feels right. And they create the language that everybody borrows from always. And
They really
they
do.
iterate on that forever. So it's incredibly important, both of these games, because Pilot Wing 64 really brought home this idea, and I think that was made by Paradigm Simulations in Dallas, which had done a lot of military simulations, like flight sims and stuff, and work with the U.S. military. And there was just a professionalism around Pilot Wing 64, both incredible.
It's
And
so
Wave Race wasn't a launch game
I think that was very shortly after the launch of, let's
because
see.
if we're throwing Wave Race in there, if it is a launch game, that's an A for sure. But I don't know if it was or
That
not.
was November
Might just be.
4th, and the N64 came out about a month and a half earlier.
Ah, okay.
So yeah, it should just be those 2 games, Pilot Wings 64 and Super Mario 64.
Oh, it's a B plus then.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking it lands in that B, but, like, it's on the cusp of A just because both those games, especially Mario 64, are
Yeah, yeah,
so great.
yeah. And honestly, like sometimes less is more, right? Like when you have a game, and Nintendo knew this. Anybody that played, and I did. Anybody that played Mario at E3 in '95 or '96, you could just like it was another era. Like we were moving to a new century, like things were
Hmm.
changing. It was a new way to communicate.
Oh, it
And
was just 100% a new language being established, essentially, and everybody
yes,
just kind of figuring out, like, wait, how do I do this? And there were a lot of
exactly.
that's why going back to that era, oftentimes those games are just so clunky feeling because there were no best practices at that time.
No, it's
They
like
were
early
figuring it out as they
VR.
go. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's profoundly important.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's brutal. I think if Wave Race was a launch game, this would absolutely be an A. But because it came out a little bit later, it's in between a B and an A.
That's tough though because both those games are bona fide classics. It's just very small. Game Boy Color is the next one.
Okay.
1998. Only two games on day one: Pocket
Ooh.
Bomberman and Tetris DX. And then we did get Game and Watch Gallery 2 just 2 days after launch.
Yeah. No.
So, I mean,
That's kind of
this,
indicative of what the Game Boy Color. It was a stopgap,
yeah.
like there is some cool stuff on that machine for sure, and it was cool to be able to play your existing Game Boy title. I think the Super Game Boy was even cooler than the Game Boy
Oh, that was
Color, to
so
be
cool.
frank. That was amazing. But I liked it because it was great to finally have color on it from a Nintendo handheld. But yeah, a little disappointing, a little thin. It just felt like a step towards something, and not
Yeah.
a great launch lineup at all. I I,
I'm
I think that's a C at best, maybe a D
I
even.
was thinking D. Like I
Yeah,
was thinking that this is just such an anemic launch lineup. Pocket
it is.
Bomberman and Tetris DX and like just like, handheld adaptations of beloved franchises, and then Game and Watch Gallery 2. Even if you want to lump that in, coming out 2 days later,
Yeah, that's
that's
weak.
not doing much for it. I'm pushing for D,
Tetris
but
still though, it wasn't as saturated then as it is now, and like
fair.
oversaturated. It was still like the business. It was still like, oh my god, let me play Tetris forever. That was absolutely the thinking back then. And Bomberman also
Was a lot bigger
was
back then.
a top dog kind of franchise. It was still, there was a steam around it, and multiplayer Bomberman was still a big thing. I remember was the Saturn had 10-player Bomberman as
Hmm.
part of their game library.
You know what? I
Um,
think you've swayed me. I think I'm going for C as well on this one.
yeah, those were big titles in their day, but now in retrospect they mean a lot less right
Yeah.
now, just
So
because we don't have the current kind of versions of those that matter as much as they did back then.
so I have dropped that into the C tier.
Okay.
So just as we're exiting the 90s here, let's recap where we're at so far. S
Yep.
tier is completely empty. A
Okay.
tier has the NES and the SNES. B
Okay.
tier has Game Boy and N64. C
Right.
tier has Game Boy Color, and D tier has Virtual Boy
Virtual Boy.
or
Oh, that
Virtual
poor
Boy.
Virtual Boy.
So that brings us to 2001, Game Boy Advance. We are in the 21st century officially, and they are not messing around. 17 games at
some
launch
good,
for the
some
Game Boy
really
Advance.
good ones.
So
Yeah.
here's what we got. We got Army Men Advance,
Uh-huh.
Castlevania Circle of the Moon, Choo Choo Rocket, Earthworm Jim, Fire Pro Wrestling, F-Zero Maximum Velocity, GT Advanced Championship Racing, Iridian 3D, Konami Crazy Racers,
Oh, that
Namco
was great.
Museum,
Yeah.
Pinobi Wings of Adventure,
Nice.
Pitfall the Mayan Adventure, Rayman
Cool.
Advance, Ready to
Oh,
Rumble Boxing Round 2, Super
okay.
Dodgeball Advance, Super Mario Advance, and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2.
S.
Yeah, that's a very strong launch lineup.
Game Boy Advance it's still incredible. Like I think all of us lifers, if Nintendo said we're going to put a Game Boy Advance adapter on our Switches so you can play those old cartridges, we would lose it. Or on the dock so you could plug in your old Game Boy Advance games. There's still so much freaking fun. Like I dive in because of the Pocket and because of I got this great device that I'm able to plug into my Steam Deck, and I can take my cartridges and import them right into the
Oh, God,
Steam
that's
Deck.
amazing.
It's awesome. And like they still hold up. Like there's so much good content on the Game Boy Advance. It was an excellent machine. The
It was
best,
really
one
a
of the
sweet
best
spot.
2D games,
Yeah.
like 2D systems out there. The 3D is pretty wonky. Like anytime you try to play a 3D type racing game on Game Boy Advance, it's a little excruciating. But all the 2D stuff, oh my goodness, so much good stuff.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm not, I've said many times, I am not the biggest handheld guy. I prefer to play my games up on a big screen. There is no denying this is their, at this point in history, that was their
Yep,
best launch lineup they'd ever put out.
that was superb. Yeah, I love
And
that machine.
the Game Boy Advance games hold up so well to this day. Like, and even going beyond the launch lineup that we're talking about, like the Metroid games from that era hold up extremely
Yeah,
well. I think that
yeah,
is the pinnacle of like what Pokemon graphics look like, and a lot of the mechanics are at their pinnacle in the Game Boy Advance catalog. Yeah,
right on.
I love
Tony Hawk on GBA was such a big deal as
such a
well. You
wild
know,
thing that they were able to figure that out. Even though
yeah,
it's completely different gameplay styles, like isometric, but
yeah. Now,
uh,
what's that studio? It's
oh god,
they're out of New York. VLAN is the new company that those guys did. I forget the name of the company now. Um,
let's look it up.
they're working on like Call of Duty. They're part of the Activision brand now at this point. Tony Hawk on GBA.
Well, Google is very unhelpful as it has become. So we'll just move on.
Okay. Yeah,
But yes.
I forget the developer. Oh,
Um,
Vicarious Visions.
oh
They're
yeah,
amazing.
they
Yeah.
also worked on the Guitar Hero franchise for a while.
And they did awesome Spider-Man games, and one of the
Yeah.
best ones ever made is Mysterio's Menace for the GBA, and that's them. They're terrific.
So that same year, Victor, we got another Nintendo console, and that was
Yes.
2001's GameCube. 12 games on day one. All-Star
Yeah.
Baseball 2002, Batman
Hmm.
Vengeance, Crazy Taxi, Dave Mirra Freestyle BMX 2, Luigi's Mansion, Madden NFL 2002, NHL Hits 2002,
A lot
Star
of
Wars
sports.
Rogue Squadron 2 Rogue Leader, Super Monkey Ball, Tarzan Untamed, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, lots of extreme sports representation, because then the last one was Wave Race Blue Storm. So many extreme
Right.
sports. And then
Yes.
FIFA Soccer 2002 Major League Soccer also arrived 3 days after launch. So if you want to count that, you can. But how are you feeling about this launch lineup?
I mean, this was absolutely a Nintendo working with the 3D console manufacturers that had already been, I think, enjoying. I think they had the PlayStation 2 launched already at that point.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this was like them shaking hands. I think right. And
Yes,
the
2000 was the
Xbox.
PS2.
Yeah, and the Xbox was about to launch. So Nintendo was doing the multi-platform deals and getting a lot of third-party content makers to bring stuff to their powerful little machine, their underappreciated little gem of a machine. But I wasn't a crazy fan of the Wave Race game on GameCube. I thought it was not as good as the
Didn't have the
N64
magic
game.
of the N64 version.
No, it didn't. I loved Rogue Leader though. That's one of the best GameCube games.
Those old Rogue
And
Squadron games were so good.
they're all good, but Rogue Leader was like, oh my god, I'm playing the movie. It was it was so stunning to look at. It was absolutely amazing. Extreme sports games are cool, but they also were ubiquitous, and they don't really represent the flavor of a launch title. And Batman Vengeance was disappointing, although it had some great art.
Super
Luigi's
Monkey
Mansion
Ball.
was Monkey Ball is a classic, absolutely a total surprise gem of a launch title. I mean, this is solid. It's solid.
Yeah.
I'm just not excited about it. You know, even Luigi's Mansion was disappointing. It was a
Yeah, it wasn't a
great tech
Mario game.
demo. Yeah, and it showed off some of the physics engine capabilities and the sort of higher resolution of everything, but it wasn't as cool as that franchise has become. You know, it was pretty thin back then.
So I'm between a B and an A. Where are you at?
Yeah, the same. I'm okay with it living in a B. Um,
Yeah.
just because it's good, but it's not unique and vital enough, you know.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
it's also not Nintendo enough.
that's very true. That is the key detractor, I think, is it's not the
Yeah.
most Nintendo lineup. Now, do you think there's too much here? Is there too much filler? Like, is it weighing down? Like, say the launch
No,
lineup was just
no.
Luigi's Mansion, Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2 Rogue Leader, Super Monkey Ball, and Wave Race Blue Storm. Say it was 4
No,
games. Would that
no,
up the value?
I feel like we are missing eras like this where there is a lot of consumer choice right out of the get-go, and there's this constant stream of content.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it is we've moved over to these games that play forever, like not just RPGs, but also live service stuff. And that seems to be everybody's like all in and they want people to just be completely enraptured in their gaming worlds. And I think this is representative of a healthier industry where the risks aren't existential on every title that gets published, and there's a lot of diversity and choice in the entertainment experiences, and that's what a consumer wants. But this also is representative of walking into a storefront, which nobody does anymore either. And I think some of this is being supplanted by the indie development that's happening right now and the risk taking that's happening there. It's a discoverability issue that everybody has right now.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of a 2001 or 2000 era launch experience, that's pretty good, you know? And I think if you're a GameCube buyer in 2001, you've got a lot of fun in that collection. It's just not enough of a uniquely Nintendo experience, which is too bad. I almost feel like if in retrospect, if I'm Nintendo working with all these 3D partners, is how do I include Nintendo characters or Nintendo bonuses in a bunch of these? Like, how do we get Mario and NHL Hits, or how do we get, Zelda has his own skateboard and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, you know,
cool.
stuff. Yeah, it'd be awesome. And more incentive to choose this path, you know, but
Mm-hmm.
I think the GameCube was a pretty cool machine. I think it was.
It was. So it lands B alongside Game Boy and Nintendo 64, which is interesting because Nintendo 64 was kind of for opposite reasons. It was like small, but to Nintendo, right? Like it wasn't like there was no third party support whatsoever.
Right. Yeah.
But all right, we are moving on. There's 5 consoles left to talk about here. What, you were going to say something, or?
Well, and I feel like it only needed Wave Race to get into S tier. It won more Nintendo for N64. That's funny.
So DS 2004, we got 7 games. We got Asphalt Urban GT, Feel the Magic XY/XX, Madden NFL 2005, Metroid Prime Hunter's First Hunt, Spider-Man 2, Super Mario 64 DS, and The Herbs Sims in the City. This wasn't very good. No, it wasn't.
No.
I mean, there's names in there, like you see Madden, you see Spider-Man, you see Mario, you see Metroid. The Sims was one of the biggest things ever. But yeah, it's the worst versions of all of them.
All of them. Kind of cool to be able to play Super Mario 64 in handheld.
But you didn't have a joystick even, or even the nub at that point. It was just a D-pad trying to control the Mario 64 characters.
Yeah, this is a D.
That's where I'm leaning too.
It's a D or a C at best. That's a D. I'm cool with a D.
Yeah, I'm putting it in D with Virtual Boy. I mean, the DS, obviously a massive success. It is Nintendo's highest selling system of all time to this day. The Switch is coming up on it, but the DS is still the king of Nintendo consoles or Nintendo systems in terms of sales. So,
awesome.
I mean,
it is a great machine. There's so much good software for it.
But that was not.
It's also very weird, but it's great.
It is. Yes, it is. 2006, 2 years later, we got the phenomenon that is known as the Nintendo Wii, and 20 games on day one. So, all right, take your sip of coffee as I go through this because it's going to be a second. Avatar: The Last Airbender, Call of Duty 3, Cars, Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2, Excite Truck, The Grim Adventures of Bill and Mandy, GT Pro Series, Happy Feet, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, Madden NFL 07, Marvel Ultimate Alliance, Monster 4x4 World Circuit, Need for Speed Carbon, Rampage Total Destruction, Rayman Raving Rabbids. So I guess we have the Wii to thank for the Rabbids. Red Steel, SpongeBob SquarePants Creature from Krusty Krab, Super Monkey Ball Banana Blitz, Tony Hawk's Downhill Jam,
Mm.
Trauma Center, Second Opinion,
Oh,
and Wii Sports, of course. And then
ooh,
3 days later, we got Rapella Tournament Fishing.
okay. A lot of lesser than ports,
Mm-hmm.
and port that games that weren't best showcased on this machine, and a lot of kludged in motion controls that didn't work, gimmicky stuff. I did love the ambition of Red Steel, though. I thought that was so cool that Ubi was trying something so big there. I love Marvel Ultimate Alliance anywhere I can play it. I'm
I
a
never
huge
played the Wii
Marvel
version.
fan.
Is it any good?
I mean, I'm sure I played it, but I liked it somewhere else more.
Yeah.
I was probably a bigger fan of it on. Had the 360 launched at that point? I can't keep all of the dates straight in
I
my
think this
head.
360 was 1 year later,
Okay, and
if I'm not
PS3
mistaken.
was
No, I guess it was
another
no.
year.
Actually, the 360 I think was out. Let me. Now you're confusing me.
I think
Uh,
if I mean I know I played Marvel Ultimate Alliance on the 360
the
and
360
loved
was
it.
out a year
Yeah.
prior to the Wii.
Wario was one of the launch titles. That was fun.
No, WarioWare was not.
Oh, it wasn't. Okay.
Trauma Center, Second Opinion was.
That was
That
great.
was a great
And
one.
that
So the highlights for me are
yeah,
obviously Wii Sports,
yeah,
The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, even though I played it on GameCube and I prefer
yeah,
to play it without the motion controls.
yeah.
Let's see what else. Excite Truck was kind of cool.
That was cool.
Um, Ultimate Alliance, I shout that out, even though I played it on like 360.
Yeah.
Super Monkey Ball, Banana Blitz, again, not as good as the
Uh,
GameCube ones, but still
no.
good.
Yeah.
Those are
This is a
the.
C. It's a C launch.
You think so? I was going kind of. Yeah, I guess. I mean, the Wii Sports one, Wii
Oh,
Sports and
actually,
Trauma
no.
Center are holding a lot of that up.
And Twilight Princess
And Twilight
B.
Princess, yeah. Let's go B.
Yeah, agreed.
All
Yeah,
right.
Wii Sports is almost enough to raise it a level for sure.
So it joins the B tier alongside Game Boy, N64, GameCube.
Okay.
All right. So
I'm feeling good about this, Brian.
yeah,
This
so
is
we
a
have
fun exercise,
we're
and
in the
it's not
final
easy.
three. The final
Okay.
three Nintendo systems to this day.
All right.
2011, the Nintendo 3DS debuts with 12
Wild.
games.
Yes.
Asphalt 3D, Bust a Move Universe,
Okay.
Combat of Giants Dinosaurs 3D, Lego Star Wars 3 The Clone Wars,
Okay.
Madden NFL Football, Nintendogs Plus Cats, Pilot
Okay.
Wings Resort, Pro Evolution Soccer 2011 3D, Rayman 3D, Ridge Racer 3D, Samurai Warriors Chronicles, The Sims 3, Steel Diver, Super Monkey Ball 3D, Super Street Fighter 4 3D Edition,
Mm-hmm.
and Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Shadow Wars.
Oh, that was a great game.
There's
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of names in there, but also like I feel like I zoned out while I was reading that list.
I know
It's
because
just like
they're
a lot
all
of white
ports.
noise.
Yeah, they're all ports. I did like. I'm forgetting it now though. Like Steel Rain, the
Steel Diver.
submarine one. Steel Diver. Yeah, that was cool. That was. I remember that being the highlight thing that they showed us off at E3, and I was playing it, and Reggie came behind me and said, "See, the 3D really works," and there's. It was gimmicky. It was very gimmicky.
It was. A
at the
lot of those
beginning.
games just had like the 3D and the touchscreen mechanics just shoehorned in.
Yeah.
I'm kind of leaning
Neat to
C
be able
on
to
this
play
one.
Street Fighter 4 away from a console.
But definitely
I
the
remember
worst version.
Definitely, yeah. But I remember feeling that was pretty cool. And also Metal Gear Solid 3 when they ported that to the 3DS was pretty awesome too. But that you're right. Those aren't the games that matter on that platform.
Yeah.
Where they're squeezing them onto there and trying to slam in all these effects and things. Yeah, you're right. I'm a C. Yeah, agreed.
All right. Well, we agree
Yeah.
there. Goes in there with the Game Boy Color.
Yeah.
All right. We're down to the final two. Oh, my God.
Okay.
The Wii U comes out in 2012. 29 games.
Oh, my Lord, brother.
29 games. All right.
Deep breath. Every port.
Assassin's Creed 3, Batman Arkham City Armored Edition, Ben 10
cool.
Omniverse, Call of Duty Black Ops 2, Darksiders 2, Epic Mickey 2, The Power of 2, good lord, ESPN Sports Connection, FIFA 13, Funky Barn, Game Party Champions, Just Dance 4, Madden NFL 13, Mass Effect 3 Special Edition,
Mm.
NBA 2K13, New Super Mario Bros. U, Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge, Nintendo Land, Rabbids Land, Scribblenauts Unlimited, Sing Party, Skylanders Giants, Sonic and All Stars Racing Transformed, Tank Tank Tank, Tekken Tag Tournament 2 Wii U Edition,
Mm-hmm.
Transformers Prime The Game, Warriors Orochi 3 Hyper, Wipeout 3, Your Shape Fitness Evolve 2013, Zombie U, and of course, New Super Mario Bros. U.
What a mess. Too much.
Way too much.
Too many ports, but some gems in there. And, like playing Batman was pretty cool on the Wii U. I loved Zombie U. I thought that was really cool, and maybe the best use of the touch screen. Was it Ninja Gaiden 2 or 3 that launched?
3, unfortunately.
Oh, that sucked.
But
That was
I
so
also
lame.
realized I said New Super Mario Brothers U twice in there.
Yeah, you did. But
Oh well.
that is the standout. That was a
I mean,
great
that was the
game.
only game I bought alongside it. I bought my Wii U day one. I went to the midnight launch with Reggie in New York, and
Oh,
I
cool.
didn't even buy anything then. I waited till I got home from New York because I didn't want to have to transport a Wii U back from New York to Maryland. So
Yeah.
I ended up just buying it at the local game store. And of the 29 games that I looked at, I just said, nope, I just want New Super Mario Brothers U,
Right.
which I
Uh,
think speaks a
I
lot
was
to.
furiously viewing a lot of these back then, and I remember playing Batman with the gimmicky stuff on the what did they call that thing? What did they call
The
the
gamepad.
gamepad? Yeah, it was pretty cool. I mean, there was definitely some interesting things. Zombie U was very, very impressive.
It's a
I
cool
think
idea.
Mass
Um,
Effect had some good ideas.
I'm
I enjoyed Sonic on Wii U, the Sonic All Stars Racing Transformed. But yeah, I'd played so many of these games somewhere else,
I'm
and
kind
the
of
sports games
leaning.
really didn't matter that much. There were so many sports games back then,
Where are you
but they're
leaning?
not needle movers. Yeah, it's weird. Like Assassin's, I played all of these somewhere else already, and then we saw little bits and pieces added to the Wii U
Yeah,
version.
I remember being at I
Mm,
guess it was like a PAX or something, and they had the Wii U's there before the game came out, and all the developers were like, "Oh yeah, come check out this game that like came out 2 years ago on Xbox 360, but we're bringing it to Wii U." And
yeah.
I'm just like, "Hey, like I already beat Arkham City. I don't need to play this at like the limited time I have at like PAX West. Like I don't need to spend
Yeah.
my time doing that." So it's like frustrating because there are a lot of great games in here, but it's like to what end?
Man,
Like unless
do
you
you think we're gonna see a repeat of that with the Switch too?
I do think we are. I think a lot of the
Yeah,
games that like developers weren't able to put on Switch 1 because just the power disparity is
yeah.
going to be they're going to be coming to Switch 2. But
And do you think it will be similarly underwhelming? Like, will people just go, I already beat that, I don't need it, or
I think as
are
long
they actually gonna?
as I mean, having it on the go is going to be a big thing. Like the Wii U, it was like, okay, it has a touch screen, but like,
Yeah,
who
yeah,
cares? I think people enjoy having their games on the go.
yeah.
Um,
I remember it being a pretty big deal to get The Witcher 3 on the Switch 1. That was a pretty cool thing to be on an airplane playing a game of that magnitude on a handheld. It's a little less impressive now with the Steam Deck and the other portable PCs and stuff, but yes, getting ports of huge games that you could carry anywhere with you, and Darksiders was in there, and Assassin's Creed, and the Borderlands, and Bioshock. It's been impressive to be able to access that stuff.
it has been.
But yeah, it's going to be interesting, right? To see, like, I really want Sony to put Spider-Man on Switch and Xbox. I mean, they have
God,
less incentive on Xbox, but I imagine how well that would do on the
that
Switch.
would be so
The
cool.
Spider-Man games, they'd be huge. I mean, like they're turning away millions of dollars, at this point, and they should just do it. Um, But with the Wii U, I think we're at a C
That's where
for
I'm
that.
leaning to. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff, but also a lot of like static as you read through that list, and
and not enough Nintendo.
games that came out on other platforms. New Super
Yeah,
Mario Brothers U is like I mean, I guess Nintendo Land if people liked that. Those are like the
yeah,
sole Nintendo standouts.
yeah,
Everything else is just kind of stuff that was already on other consoles and
yeah.
nothing really special, and a lot of shoehorned in touchscreen controls and second screen controls. Zombie U was another standout, but
Yes, yeah,
yeah, I guess we'll put it in the C alongside Game Boy Color and the 3DS.
right.
And that brings
I
us. Oh, go
almost
ahead.
feel like, I mean, I think it's more impressive than those other two because of the sheer amount of titles.
Do you
And
want
if
to
you're
move it up
just
to
a
B?
Nintendo,
That
I,
is
I f- I
Game
feel
Boy,
like it's
N64, GameCube, and Wii.
um, no, yeah, it's
Okay,
in there. It's like a C
it's
plus.
it's tough. This is a
Yeah,
tough exercise. This is my first time
it
making a
is.
tier list here.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's plenty of other topics we could do this on in the future. But so if you like this, leave a comment or reach out to me and let me know. You know what's next, Victor? It is the game that or the system we are currently on. The Nintendo Switch came out in
Yes.
2017. 10 games, much more manageable here.
Yeah.
A novel that I have to read. So 1-2 Switch, Fast RMX, I Am Setsuna, Just Dance 2017, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Shovel Knight Spectre of Torment, Shovel Knight Treasure Trove, Skylanders Imaginators, Snipper Clips Cut It Out Together, and Super Bomberman R.
And Fast RMX, you said?
Yes, Fast RMX. That's
That
the
was
kind of like
terrific.
F-Zero proxy.
Yeah, I like that game a lot. I enjoyed that game. It was all about Breath of the Wild, though. That
Oh
was
yeah.
all that we were enamored with and playing.
I
Like
remember there was
nothing
like a
else
100%
really.
attach rate at one point.
Yeah. Like, why would you buy the machine without getting that game? There would be just no reason. And like, it was the Breath of the Wild system. I kind of dug Snipper Clips.
Yeah, Snipper Clips is awesome.
That was a cool game. And
Super Bomberman R was rough when it launched. Like, I gave it a very low score at Game Informer when
yeah,
it first came out. I played it this past week with a group of guys, and it was so much fun. So it
that's
has come
cool.
around. They've done a good job of improving that. Shovel Knight rules.
Oh, those were great. Yeah. That was a
Um,
great fit on this. Like all the indie stuff. Like think of the Switch as this funnel to indie game development and that kind of imagination. Like it's just such a beautiful fit, right?
yeah,
These very low file size games to download to your Switch to take with you anywhere you go. Perfect fit.
absolutely.
And I think kicked off with Shovel Knight just in a wonderful way right there.
It really did.
Yeah.
I'm leaning A on this.
Yeah, me too.
Not quite as good as the Game Boy Advance, but it is a very good lineup that really brought us, into this era where Nintendo was going to be like, hey, look, this is what happens when we combine our stable of developers. That's not just like, oh, this developer's making a game for 3DS, this developer's making a game for Wii U. This is
Yeah.
what happens when you just have all of them focusing on the same platform. And I always talk about how the 2017, like if you were just ranking like first years, which might be
Yeah.
another future episode, but
Absolutely. Oh, 2017 was
2017 was
insane, man.
legendary for the Switch.
Yes. Oh
But
man, and just gaming in general, just to kind of define what was achievable for the industry. Like
mhm.
what a high watermark. That first year of the Nintendo Switch was redonkulous, man. Just like an unbelievable amount of incredible experiences.
It was ridiculous. So let's run down the tiers that we got here. Now that we are
Okay.
finalized, and you let me know if there's anything you think we should change.
Okay.
In the S tier, we have Game Boy Advance, and that's it. In the
Yep.
A tier, we have the NES, SNES, and Switch. In the
Yep.
B tier, we have Game Boy, N64, GameCube, and Wii.
Yep.
In the C tier, we have Game Boy Color, 3DS, and Wii U. And then in the D tier, we have the opposite sides of the spectrum here in terms of overall sales, the Virtual Boy and the DS.
Wild, right?
Yeah, so I have a
It's
few
crazy.
statistics that I've pulled out here. Biggest
Yep.
launch lineups overall: the Wii U with 29 games, then the Wii with 20 games, and then the NES and Game Boy Advance with 17 each. The
Yep.
smallest launch lineups: N64 and Game Boy Color with 2 each, Virtual Boy with 4, And looking at that, and I mentioned how the D tier has both the Virtual Boy and the DS. There is no correlation between
No.
success and a huge lineup or small launch lineup. Uh,
But also timing as well, like timing on when you release these trailblazing products and these ideas, because Nintendo always has tried to innovate. This is maybe the least innovative launch system that we're about to enter into with the Switch 2, although we don't know much about the machine yet.
mhm.
I haven't seen it run its full paces, but it feels very iterative. And Nintendo hasn't really done that maybe since the Super Nintendo. But even that leap from NES to SNES was quite remarkable. Like that was the Genesis represented that as well, but that was a huge sort of turning of the knob to the higher fidelity visuals and much more cool scrolling and stuff. But the Switch 2 feels like less of that. But every one of these game systems was quite innovative in its time and quite ambitious and could have, I mean, and so many of them did, been tremendous failures for the company. And it is, I think, a big question of when they launched this. Like I almost feel like if you took the GameCube and that philosophy and that kind of development output and you moved it to a different time, it may have done better. Like
Yeah.
maybe a pivot from the Switch to a cube that's at home where the focus is on more higher resolution 4K visuals on television sets might have been an interesting pivot for Nintendo to do. Now, I'm happy that they're doing the Switch 2, don't get me wrong, but it is interesting. Like the Virtual Boy, everybody always talks about that being the failure, but had it come out in a different time, maybe it would have been a remarkable smash success for them,
Yeah, it may have just been ahead of its time. The technology wasn't quite there yet.
Yep,
Like we're seeing certain successes and failures in the world of VR right now.
totally.
Um, but I also pulled out the most common franchises that appeared in
Mm,
these launch lineups. The first one,
Madden,
obvious, Super Mario Brothers with 7,
right?
Madden with 5.
I heard Madden a lot, yeah.
Yes, I was surprised by that. Super Monkey
Yeah,
Ball with 3,
okay.
and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater with 3.
Wow,
And meanwhile,
okay.
The Legend of Zelda has only appeared as a launch game twice, which is the same number of times as both Pilot Wings and the Excite series. So Excite Bike and Excite Truck being the
Okay,
examples there,
okay.
which is wild because you always think about the Zelda franchise like, oh yeah, they should launch with the Zelda game, and it's only happened twice. Twilight Princess on
Yeah,
Wii, and Breath of the Wild, both of those were simultaneously shipped to the previous generation as well.
right.
So that was interesting.
Yeah, that's wild. Or it was the last game for Wii U, if you
Yeah,
look at it that way, right? It closed out that console
and it
generation.
more or less closed out the GameCube generation as well with Twilight
Yeah,
Princess. Um,
right.
Normally, we would take a break before going to definitive ranking, but I unfortunately am on on the clock right now. I have to step away to catch a screening of a movie that you could probably guess what that movie is. It's Captain America. Uh,
Yep.
so
I'm seeing that today too.
we're just gonna jump right into definitive ranking. It is a recurring segment where we take a Nintendo topic and give our own personal top 5 lists. Since we were talking all about the launch lineups this episode, Victor, I want to get your top 5 launch games on a Nintendo system of all time. So just start at 5, count it down to 1, give me a quick sentence or two about each.
Okay. I'm going to say The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was so, I think, transformative and such a great reinvention of something that, we're all familiar with. And there was anticipation and expectation, and it subverted it and exceeded expectations.
So is that your number
That's
5?
one.
Oh, you're
That's
starting
number.
at
Oh,
1. Okay.
I'll start. Yeah, that would be number one. So,
Okay. Well,
can I invert? I usually we start with 5
yeah,
normally.
we
Okay.
start
Well,
with hey, you already said that Breath of the Wild is your favorite game of all time. So I
yeah,
think that's just saying like, hey, like, look, obviously that's number 1. So that go to
yeah.
5 and let's go down from there.
Okay, cool. Number 5. Oh my God, there's so many to choose from. I think Rogue Leader might be number 5 for me. Star Wars for the GameCube. I remember the game being hyped up on big screens at E3, and just like I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and it was such a huge leap forward visually from the N64 games. I
Hmm.
was so excited for that. So I love that game still. So Rogue Leader's up there. On the Wii. Nope. On the Wii U, I'm looking at lists of games right now. Well, what was the big game for the Game Boy Advance? I can't remember.
That was Super Mario Advance was like one of the big ones. There was also Tony Hawk's Pro Skater.
Yeah.
Those were the big ones that I recall seeing.
Okay. Okay. I would say Super Mario World then
Oh
for
yeah,
my 4th one. Just an incredible Super Nintendo title. Also a massive leap up from what we had seen visually on the NES, although those games were also incredible as well. But yeah, beautiful, tuned, and just showing off the musical and visual prowess of the studio of the company. So that's number 4. Number 3 would be oh boy, this is tough. Some of these lists are enormous. Three's Tetris for the Game Boy Advance, or for the Game Boy, the original Game Boy.
hmm
That is seminal, and I don't know. There's something so primal and perfect of the black and white shapes coming down on that very primitive architecture, but it was the perfect home for it. It really clicked. It felt it felt like a gift every time you played it, you know?
it
And
really did.
yeah, it was such a special symbiotic, you know, like eternal kind of connection there. It just felt like it was meant to be, like it was chiseled together.
There's a
Tetris and
reason that it's still so wildly popular, even in its most basic forms.
yeah. And then 2 is Super Mario 64 for the Nintendo 64, which was my one for a long time. And I think, as we discussed, it changed the language of video games. It was another, we had turned a corner and we had grown up a little bit. And it was one of the games that I was using to sell the idea of our television show. I would talk to broadcasters and I would show them footage of Super Mario 64. And I would say, this is not your the game system that you have at home with your children right now. We are shifting and we're going to be playing in full 3D in real time, and it's going to be like playing a movie. We're going to have control of the camera. Even it's really a profound difference, and it certainly was that and more.
It absolutely was. And then you already said number one is Breath of the Wild.
Yep.
Uh, we have some overlap on our lists. Number five for me is going to be Tetris.
Yep.
This just a timeless classic that really redefined a lot of things. Got a lot of gamers who are a lot of people who weren't gamers into gaming.
Yeah, hell yeah.
One of the greatest selling games of all time. Number four, Wii Sports.
Oh,
Uh,
that's great too.
Speaking
Yeah.
of things that got non-gamers to play video games, I mean, Wii Sports might be the best example of that ever. My grandmother has a Wii to this day because of Wii Sports.
That's great.
Number three for me is going to be Super Mario 64. They designed the controller around this game. That's why the N64 controller is how it is, because they wanted to make sure Mario 64 played perfectly. And so they created the N64 controller just for Mario 64. And you can pick that up at any point and it still plays phenomenal. It is every single action that you do in that game is just unbelievably fun. And it's just the simple act of jumping and running around. That's why they open up with him out in the courtyard instead of in the castle and in a level, because they just wanted you to understand, like, oh, it's fun to just run around and climb trees and triple jump and all these other things. It's one of the greatest, most influential games of all time, and it's only topped by two games in my top 10 games of all time. Number two is Super Mario World. I think it's the greatest platformer of all time. And then number one, my favorite game of all time, your favorite game of all time, The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, man.
So yeah, we
Just
had a
coming out of that cave in Breath of the Wild, and
oh,
and just feeling like we've stepped into a Miyazaki movie. It was just
so good.
so profound. And God, and I think what happens too with this industry is we feel like we've seen it all. We have these waves of like, okay, I get it, and then there's a lot of iterating on a concept and a lot of things that feel like a derivation or some kind of kludging together of a couple of ideas, and it's re-represented, but it's familiar.
Hmm.
And here was a game that was innately familiar, but everything was adapted and changed for this new philosophy. And we had no idea where we were going to go. And I'm sure as you played it, like when I was playing, it's like, okay, when are we going to get to the touch points that we know from all the other Zelda games? And they don't. They subvert
Yeah.
them. They change them all the way along. It's amazing.
I mean, that's my justification for why it overtook Ocarina of Time as my favorite game of all time, was that like I felt that like, okay, well, when Ocarina of Time came out, there was this sense of wonder that I felt. And then I was so desensitized by future open world games like the GTAs of the world, the Red Dead's, Assassin's
Yeah.
Creeds, all those games. I thought I had seen everything that open world games had to offer. And
Right.
I was like, okay, well, that sense of wonder that I felt playing Ocarina of Time back on the N64, I'll never feel that again. And that's a bummer, but it's why Ocarina of Time has such a special place in my heart. And then
Right.
Breath of the Wild somehow subverted all the things that open world games had taught me to that point, to give
Yeah.
me that sense of wonder and that sense of like wanting to explore and everything. But yeah, that's another.
I feel bad for people that just will not open their mind to games. They just do not understand what we are talking about right now. And I hope that my hope is that more people will, and hopefully who's ever watching, listening, talks to the people that they know in their life, and they get them to have an experience like that, because it is superb.
It's
It's profound.
fantastic. But Victor,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining me for this episode of All Things Nintendo. This is fantastic.
Loved it, man. Love talking with you. Congrats on the success of the show, and excited to come back and talk again anytime.
You are welcome anytime you want. And thank you so much to everyone for listening. As you know, my Patreon and the associated community Discord server are the best ways to get any questions or comments in, but you can also get in touch with me at brian@allthingsnintendo.com, or hit me up on Blue Sky or Instagram at Brian P. Shea. That's also my YouTube channel name, and please subscribe to it. It helps out the show a lot. Victor, where can people find you online?
I'm on Blue Sky, Victor Lucas on Blue Sky, and Batwing on Instagram, and Victor_Lucas. I'm still on Twitter, although it's not nice over there most of the time. I'm on YouTube at youtube.com/EPNTV. And that's where you can watch classic episodes of EP premiering every Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific. And I stream all the time on YouTube and on Twitch, which is twitch.tv/EPN. And would love for you to come and join our community, which is filled with lots of awesome people that many of them have been watching EP for a very long time. And I'm always just blown away by their graciousness, their kindness, and their knowledge. God, I communicate to and with a lot of very, very smart people that know this space very well, as I'm sure your fans do too.
Yeah, I have an amazing community around this show as well, and I'm grateful for each and every one of them. But that is our show for this week. Thank you again to everyone for listening. Take care. We'll see you next time. Before we wrap up this episode of All Things Nintendo, I just want to give a special shout out to the $10 patrons to the show: Abdullah, Adam Scott, Alex Stadnick, Andy Junkins, Ben Richland, Chaps My Ass, Derek Sigmund, Dusty Beeman, Ian T. Clark, Jackal, Jason Thompson, Jawar Hello, Jill Grote, Johnny Five, Jordan Sloat, Jose Villalobos, Joshua DeProy, Cody Gibson, Creeper207, Mad Genie Confused Koala, Megan S., Pratable, Rob McCann Bobby265, Robert Sousa, Russell Sayer, Smithy Poo, Tux DC, Wham Bam Sam the Gaming Man, Zachary Pliggy, and Zek 3 Sword Sama. Thank you so much for your continued support of this show.